All right, it's 7:30. Let me call to order the work session of the Swarthmore Borough Council for April 6th, 2015. I'm glad to see we have such a well-attended meeting. We've got lots on our agenda. We have a long way out there for those of you who are interested in continuing your conversation, but we've got a lot of interesting things on the agenda here, including a discussion of a bamboo ordinance that's in the works, a discussion and potentially a vote on a new parking ordinance, as well as a number of other issues, including the, I guess it's variously been called Town Green and Central Park, but the exciting new idea we have for the area surrounding Borough Hall parking lot. So with those and other issues on the agenda, this being a work session, we have two periods of public comment. The first item on the agenda after our roll call is public comment. And then after we finish all the committee's reports, we also have another opportunity for public comment. So by way of roll call, I see that everyone is present. I welcome you all here tonight, and if there's anybody who has any comments on any matter that might come before council this evening, please come up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and let us know what you have to say.
Hi, my name is Scott Richardson, 304 Rutgers Avenue, also the owner of Vacation Years at 10 Park Avenue. I want to commend the council on the fact that for probably 20-some years now, the parking issue has been an issue, and the fact that you are actually moving forward, I think, is a good thing. However, as Newton said, for every action there is an opposite reaction. The three things I think I want to address today is the fact that you've already changed the meters over, so I kind of have the feeling that you already know what you're going to do and how you're going to vote. I mean, the town's been turned over. The 2-hour meters are put in place. I have a problem with, as a business person, we have the construction going on right now that is really hampering all of the local businesses. For everyone I've talked to, all their businesses are off, and mine personally is off 42.3% on my lunchtime business, and thank God for catering, otherwise I might not be here talking to you. But the fact that you've all of a sudden decided to increase the parking revenue by 100% minimal, that would be your, the meters that were 2-hour meters that are now, quarter for a half an hour instead of a quarter for an hour, and the old 5-hour and 8-hour meters that used to be able to, I don't even exactly know if they didn't actually park at them, but I know it wasn't 16 quarters to park at an 8-hour meter. The businesses that are struggling downtown to have an existence, and the first thing I would think is that the rate increase is just really uncalled for. I mean, the media maybe, not Swarthmore. I've gone around to a couple other towns and looked at theirs, and it's basically the same thing, a quarter per hour. Second thing would be, we have a real issue in the fact that, I don't know if you've thought about or addressed the fact that the merchants have employees that need to park. And in the past, what they did is they parked in 5-hour or 8-hour meters, which were on the outside of town. And since the new enforcement of morning and afternoon tickets, all of a sudden now, you know what they're doing? They're parking in front of their own store so that they can watch the meter and feed it. So, that's one of those reactions that I don't think that maybe it's been thought up. There's on Park Avenue in front of me, I think there's 14 spots. 6 of them are currently used by employees of businesses on my section of Park Avenue. And the third thing would be, as a property owner, the tenants. What has been done as far as the looking into what the tenants can do. And I don't know, maybe you should consider allowing them to park in front of our residences. Right now, you can't park in the downtown overnight. But, you know, when we used to have the loop over by the college, which is no longer existent, that's where they used to park. They used to get a sticker for overnight parking, which was at no charge. And now they have to go all the way down past the co-op, I think, to the 12-hour meters, if I'm not mistaken. It's not well lit. You know, a lot of safety concerns for, you know, the female tenants that I have anyways, walking that distance. So, you know, if indeed that's the only place that they can park, then maybe you might want to consider, you know, really lighting that area up, okay? And that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Any other public comment?
My name is Lori Artis, 114 Park Avenue. 118 Park Avenue, oh boy, I'm not nervous. I have Swarthmore Ballet Theater. We've been here for 25 wonderful years. The people in Swarthmore are so nice. And we train serious dancers. Some of our dancers have become famous, and we have principal dancers. Those are the leading dancers from the Pennsylvania Ballet come and teach for us all year. However, in the summer, the parking is going to be a problem because I was at the parking meter, or the meeting, and it seemed fine, but now it's 4 hours, and the dancers come at 9:30 in the morning and leave at 4:30. These same dancers leave at 4:30 in the intensive in the summer, and a lot of them drive. And so they will have to leave the intensive and go out in their leotard and tights and not only feed the meter, but move their car because there's a 4-hour limit. It's not a matter of putting more quarters in, it's a matter of the 4-hour limit. And we do have quite a few scholarship students. One of my classes, 5 out of every 8 students are a scholarship. I don't mind feeding their meters if they have meters. But it is a matter of going out in the middle of the intensive and moving their car, and maybe there won't be any place to park. So that is a problem for us. And I didn't understand that when I was at the meeting for the parking meters before. So.
I'm Ed Orlis, supporting what Lori said here. This was sent to us by certified mail to have us join in the planning commission meeting. And discussion of parking became a real issue because there was realized there would be some cutbacks in spaces. And it was discussed that some of the hours would be changed. What got proposed or presented here in the Swarthmorian as a done deal, which you're going to vote on and make a done deal, perhaps, or hopefully not, is not what was discussed. And I don't think that the members who were concerned with parking are certainly aware of this unless they read the Swarthmorian. It was a much more liberal parking time space in different sections. But the main concern, Lori expressed, and I would like to have dancers continue dancing here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Marty Spiegel, and coordinator of Swarthmore Town Center activities. And I first of all, I thank council for addressing this issue, and also for the merchants for showing up. You know, we've been trying to get merchant input on this issue as much as we can during the discussions of the parking, because we knew, and I certainly was aware that merchants would be affected by any parking changes that were proposed. My major concern has been all along is addressing the issue of merchant accessibility for merchants to have a place to park. The 2-hour thing, you know, I'm not going to address the issue of the 2 hours. I think that changing our downtown core parking to 2 hours was the right thing to do in most cases. But as Scott said, the unintended consequences of not providing for merchant parking is the merchants are now forced to park as close as they can to their stores so they can keep going out and feeding meters, because the long-term meters have been taken away from the parking lot out front where they didn't belong in the first place. Right now we have 10 4-hour, I think, or 24-hour meters just outside the core of our downtown. We have 10 of them in front of the Dartmouth House on Dartmouth Avenue, and 10 of them just past by the Methodist Church on Park. That's 20 spaces, which is a start, but I think it doesn't quite adequately address the issue. So the first thing I would propose is looking at providing more 4-hour spaces so that more merchants have an opportunity and accessibility. That doesn't mean availability. Could be that those spaces will be filled up when the merchants get there. But it's accessibility and at least gives them an opportunity to have spaces that are outside the core and of a sufficient duration and location where it's not as convenient for the public to park, and a small enough duration that it's not convenient for commuters to park. The other proposal that I make, and we can address this at some point in the future, is providing some kind of a permit for merchants so that they can purchase a monthly permit and wouldn't have to worry about feeding meters at all. You can discuss the fees for that, but so we're not asking for free parking, but I do think that something that allows merchants to park all day without having to worry about feeding meters is really the only feasible way of doing it, because you're in the middle of whether you're cutting meat or cutting hair or brewing coffee. You can't necessarily run out and feed a meter, even if it's a 4-hour meter. So I'm glad we have an opportunity to talk about this. I think it's an important issue. Merchants are a very distinctive class of consumer parking in our downtown. I'm glad we're having an opportunity to address it seriously. So I hope that we can come up with a plan that will meet the needs of at least as many people as possible. Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Kenneth Gelsizer. I'm not a resident of Broomall, but I'm a consumer. And I live in Broomall.
Can you tell me spell your last name?
Gelzhiscr. And I spend a lot of money here. My wife's family is from this area. And to be honest, I go to your restaurants, get a haircut here, do banking here, do everything. And I don't think it was really well thought out just to go point blank with 2 hours, and it's an increase. And you have a problem with SEPTA over here. I mean, you got to take the train, unless you get there at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to find a spot. And I think what I'd like to see for Swarthmore, I hope to be a future resident. I'll be 64. I hope to purchase a place here, a condo or whatever for the future. But I want to see a community that's reaching out. When you look at Broomall and Newtown Square, anywhere they can build anything, and I could have all my needs met there and not even pay for parking, just go right there. So I think we need to revisit the issues. I go by Dunkin' Donuts, I go to your Dunkin' Donuts, I go to your restaurants, haircut, everything else. So I think you have to look at it also. Do you want people outside of Swarthmore to come here? The Chinese restaurant, we have 3 in Broomall, but I came here, and the town didn't support it, so it closed. So you got to really look at some really hard issues here. But I'm coming here as an outsider, saying that I spend a lot of money here in your town all the time.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anyone have anything else to offer the borough?
My name is Tom Elmer. I live at 8 Park Avenue. It's above the Renatos. I work for myself at home. I used to use your 8-hour meters in this lot here, or your 5-hour meters, excuse me, because it was easy for me. And then one day I walked out and found out everything is now 2 hours. And the amount of money I got to put in those meters increased substantially. For me, a person that lives downtown, now I'm not a merchant, I want in if you're going to do something for people that live downtown as well, that are merchants that have stores that are downtown. because finding a parking place for me now has become a real hassle. I used to be able to park, where all that construction is taking place in front of the other entrance into the college. That was taken away. So now, if I'm lucky, I get a good spot behind, like where the post office is, or maybe I'll get lucky and get a spot. It's not metered where the Chinese restaurant is located. It just turned out to be a real hassle for me. And I can't, I'm in the middle of, talking on a phone to a client. I can't run out and, oh God, I forgot the 2 hours that I've got to put more money in the meter. So it says on here that we're going to talk about resolving this, but the meters have all been changed. So is this already accomplished? Is there a possibility that there might be a change? I hope so, because it's been a problem for me personally, and as well as I know the merchants because I also visit them, and the amount of people in them has really dropped. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anyone else have anything to share with Borough Council on parking or any other issue? All right, hearing no other comments at this point, our first session of public comment is closed. Let me just make one change in the agenda and go first to finance before we get to the
No comments.
That was quick.
Promise 5 seconds.
All right. Lauren, we have some interesting things on the agenda under the heading of environment.
We do. So, the current draft of the bamboo ordinance is on the website if anyone wants to look at it, and it was reviewed by the Environment Committee last month, and and it's before us tonight to talk about, and I believe everyone's had a chance to look at that. Before I just open it up to questions and comments, we did have some changes and questions that we wanted to pose to you all tonight. So one of the things that isn't really supposed to be here is a mention of a water course. That's supposed to be just deleted earlier because it's too hard to remove bamboo from a stream bed. It's very disruptive, and that shouldn't really be there.
Where in the ordinance is
Okay,
that?
just the definition.
all right. So first of all, we can take out the definition of water course, which is number G, which is letter G. And then in the definition of a buffer zone, the phrase "or from any water course" should be deleted. And so that's that. And then a couple of questions were raised that makes me think something needs to be worked out a little bit more. David Cregan brought up the a real example of a yard that has bamboo, and also the 5 adjoining yards next to it all have bamboo. So would the one person if they complain to the borough, would all the people whose yards touch that yard have to put barriers in their yards because this one person didn't like it? It seems that would be kind of extreme. So that was one question. So and another one was, what if SEPTA decided that they wanted people who live like along Benjamin West Avenue, they all have bamboo in their yards. What if SEPTA said, hey, we're tired of taking down the bamboo, and let's make all these people along Benjamin West take down their bamboo? Like, that's another case where it seems it would be unreasonable. But the way this is written, I don't know if that would happen or not. Now, and finally, I just wondered if, on the second page, letter B, especially the second sentence, this ordinance shall also not be deemed to create any affirmative duty on behalf of the borough to require the removal of bamboo or the enforcement of this ordinance, which enforcement shall at all times remain at the discretion of the borough. Does that mean that the borough can say, Well, I don't think we'll enforce this because, like what is that, could that apply to some of these cases where a complaint might seem kind of specious?
Well, I think that's kind of an implied right of the borough under every ordinance. I mean,
Okay,
it's
right.
not, if, we have a property maintenance ordinance that requires that you not have people flaking off of your house and that your windows not be broken. If
Right.
somebody brings a complaint, that doesn't mean that the borough is obligated to go to issue a citation. It's up to the borough, it's kind of a judgment call on where it's going to be
Okay.
effective when, sometimes issuing a citation is effective, sometimes it's not. I don't think that there's, any particular right of a citizen to make the borough issue a citation. I think in this instance, it's included in there because this issue is so particularly thorny and difficult, and I think it's good to put residents on notice that, just because your neighbor has bamboo, this ordinance doesn't mean you've got a guarantee.
Okay, all right.
So I thought it was good to have it in there.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so, and I guess we'll just open it up to questions and comments from
Well, Laura,
council. Yeah.
before you get into beyond the specifics you've raised, would it be useful to at least give us a 1-minute overview of the ordinance that your committee is recommending?
Oh, sure,
Just so we
okay,
have
yeah.
an idea of what the basic approach is.
Absolutely. So, a lot of local ordinances banning the planting of bamboo and limiting the growth of bamboo have been enacted in Rose Valley and Rutledge and Nether Providence and Haverford and a bunch of townships around here. And I think, honestly, that our borough is thinking harder about this than some of the others because some of them seem kind of vague. But anyway, so we're, but basically what this is saying is that this is a complaint-based ordinance. So if there are neighbors who are not able to arrange a way of agreeing about the bamboo, the person who does not want the bamboo growing onto their property can complain to the borough. And at that point, this ordinance is activated. So they will have to get the bamboo out of the buffer zone, and it's a 10-foot zone in their yard that's next to their neighbor's yard. And the leaves, the roots, nothing of the bamboo can encroach into the buffer zone. They will have 60 days to get started removing it, and then if it's more than 750 square feet, so that would be 75 feet along the buffer zone. If it's more than that, it's unreasonable to expect people to remove a huge grove of bamboo because it's very expensive, and we're aware of that. So they can gradually remove or put in a barrier to just keep it out of the buffer zone, and they can do it, like 750 feet at a time until it's all done. And so there's some time allowed. And also, no planting of bamboo will be allowed in the borough. And this is, there are at least 3, and there are more than 3 really cases where neighbors are very unhappy about bamboo that's gotten into their yards. And there are also people who are unhappy and kind of really nervous that they're going to have to pay a huge amount of money to get rid of it. So we're trying to walk a fine line here, and so we're working to come up with something that I think will increase neighborliness. I think it's better than suing people. It's a hopefully a clear, simple guideline for bamboo, which can destroy foundations of houses, and it's very hard to get rid of. So that's kind of what it is.
Thank you for that overview. Could I just suggest, I know you talked about it being a complaint-based ordinance. It seems to me this is really a buffer zone-based ordinance. To me, the heart of this ordinance says, if you have bamboo on your property now, you can't let it get to within 10 feet of the property line.
Right.
And that seems to be, to me, the core of the ordinance. And then there's sort of an overlay on that, which maybe is neighborliness, which is that enforcement of that buffer zone rule isn't triggered unless there's a neighbor who
Exactly,
complains.
exactly.
But I guess maybe I just heard it a little bit differently. But to call it a complaint-based ordinance, I think maybe sets the wrong tone and almost
Okay.
describes as pitting neighbor against neighbor. To me, it's a
Which side is the buffer zone on?
The person who owns the bamboo.
So it doesn't, it's not when it approaches onto the neighbor's yard?
No.
They can't let, you can't let
Your
your bamboo grow within more than 10 feet closer to your property line. You have to keep it 10 feet away from your property line.
Right.
If you have it.
Inside your property line.
Must
Well,
be.
inside your property line. Yeah.
I have a question. There are a lot of municipalities that have started to do bamboo ordinances. There's also one that I saw, that Chad's Ford, that actually does a no noxious vegetation, including bamboo, which actually, in some ways, there are some other things like kudzu and so forth that are very invasive and very difficult to control. And that's another approach than just bamboo. But many of the ordinances that I was looking at actually do allow you to plant new bamboo as long as you follow very strict guidelines as to how it can be contained. And they tend to say you can plant it in containers that are above ground.
Oh, yes, right, yeah.
As long as the container is made of certain materials. And to me, the proposed bamboo ordinance here simply says you are not allowed to plant any new bamboo in your yard at all.
Okay.
And I have a problem with that. I think that I absolutely agree with the idea that if you have bamboo, you need to keep this buffer area free of the bamboo before your property line. But I think that given the fact that it is quite possible to plant bamboo in a decorative way in certain containers and so forth, to say that the property owner is not allowed to do that at all seems a little bit on the extreme. And a number of ordinances around here do allow you to do that. They allow you to plant it in the above ground containers, or they allow you to plant it in ground as long as you put a barrier that goes down 30 inches into the ground and so forth. So I'm wondering, what was the discussion on the EAC in terms
Well,
of that?
I think we didn't need, I think that people could plant it in containers. I just didn't even think that this barred the planting of it in containers. That, to me, that was just something different, but.
But, I mean, right now,
Yeah.
it's saying,
Yeah, right.
you can't,
Right.
you are not allowed to plant any new bamboo.
Yeah,
No, but you're not allowed to plant it
in the ground.
You're not allowed to plant.
on any lot or parcel of land.
Right.
So you could do it in a pot?
Well, a minute, I'm sorry.
I mean,
I think that would be allowed here, but, I mean,
I
we
would-
could certainly specify it.
It sounds like
It's not-
something
Well, the
that
other-
is probably
right.
worth.
Yeah, no.
There
it's
are,
definitely something
right,
we're-
there are a number of ordinances that say you can plant new bamboo as long as it's planted in this certain way.
Mhm.
And I think that I would prefer it if our ordinance allowed that.
Thank you.
It can be a beautiful plant
Mhm.
if it's contained.
Let me first say that I have no skin in this game. I have no bamboo on my property, no adjoining property owner has bamboo. And I don't know where I am at the end of the day on the whole principle of this. I would note you gave some examples which you tend to immediately to discount as the 5 property owners who together have bambooed on each of you. I would not regard a complaint by one of them as specious, nor accept a raise. Speciousness is going to be in the eyes of the beholder if we begin to try to differentiate legitimate complaints about bamboo spreading or not. I think the ordinance should quite specifically describe what is meant by the word remove, whether that's just taking it down, cutting it off, or whether it means also digging up the root system or treating the root system, which is how I gather one deals with bamboo. So I think remove has to be further defined. I think that in terms of the 60 days time within which to do something, I think some account must be taken of the fact that particular removal involves treating it in the ground, which is something you can't do if the ground is frozen. And so in defining the 60-day period, I think you have to take some account in the fact that that 60-day period can't run in the winter. These are very narrow points which really don't go to the central issue of whether this is something that we want generally to legislature as to which at present I don't know what I think.
And this does not lay out what the penalties are either. Yeah.
The
We have to come up with
refers
that.
you to the other section. There's a
Right.
reference at the end to the general penalties section.
Do we have a penalty yet
Which is
about
$600 per day. The
Oh.
maximum fine is $600 per day.
For any
For
federal
any kind of, okay.
Yeah, it's a
So it's the same as
any
other kind of violation you have?
I have one observation.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
I have one observation that came up. And by the way, thank you, Lauren and the Environmental Committee for all the work. I guess the Environmental Action Committee, I should say. Advisory Committee, EAC, as it's well known and loved, for all the work you did on this, because this is a tough one. One issue that came up in the committee meeting that we had was enforcement and the challenges that an ordinance like this might pose to the borough when it comes to enforcement. If someone does complain, I think, Lauren, the complaint-based aspect of the ordinance you were talking about refers to the fact that if nobody complains, it's sort of no harm, no foul. But if someone does complain to the borough, then what? And we talked some about that at our meeting, and I don't think we had a meeting of minds on that issue. I think Dave Murphy and myself maybe felt slightly different from how Lauren feels about it. But because at least part of the impetus for this ordinance comes from the fact that neighboring communities like Rose Valley, for example, have similar ordinances, whether they're better or worse than this one. I don't know. I'm sure they're not as good as this one, but if it's not too much of an imposition, I'd like to ask Jane to do some due diligence on the enforcement side of this and to talk to at least some of her counterparts in neighboring communities that have a bamboo ordinance to see just what their experience has been. In other words, is this an ordinance that is enforced at all by anybody? Is it just kind of ignored? In which case, we might think differently about it before we voted on it. Or is it an ordinance that, from time to time does require enforcement? And if so, what sort of problems, if any, have other municipalities or communities had with it? So I hate to put another burden on your shoulders, Shane, but if you could do that, I just think that would be helpful for council in thinking about it, because I believe that enforcement aspect of this is something that is at least potentially troubling. As you mentioned, Lauren, at the outset, there are particular situations where it might not be so clear what the right answer is. If neighbors can't work it out themselves, and of course the hope always is that neighbors will be able to work it out among themselves without the borough having to step in and do anything at all. But so that's just a suggestion, I guess a request really I have.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Lauren, one thing I like about the ordinance is that it has a nice, clear standard. It basically says you can't have bamboo, and I guess that includes branches, stalks, or roots, within 10 feet of the property line. And at least based on what I've heard at some of the public sessions, bamboo can be extremely invasive, and so these ordinances that try to engineer specific kinds of barriers, I could see being more problematic than just a simple rule that says, if you have bamboo on your property, it's your responsibility to make sure it doesn't get closer than 10 feet to the property line. So that's certainly one thing I like about it. It's a nice, clearly articulated standard. And as to you had raised earlier this point about SEPTA. I don't know if that's a particular concern of particular neighbors, but it seems to me that the complaints we've heard, the things that I think give rise to this ordinance, are people who say that bamboo has been invasive and has done damage to their building structures or makes it impossible for them to have a garden. And so it may be that that we ought to limit it to residential or perhaps some other zones. But how is the SEPTA property zone? Do we have a utility zone? How is
No,
It's not zoned at all.
no, it's included in residential districts, I believe.
But I think there are
Well,
ways.
not, it's included what's adjacent to it. I mean, the town centers in the town center district along, Dartmouth and Benjamin West is probably in a residential.
But I think that the thrust of this is to protect,
It's to protect,
Neighbor from neighbor rather than.
yeah.
rather than
yeah.
setting.
It's unlikely a session would ever do anything. It's just, we're just trying to see how, yeah.
But my main comment is
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
this idea
yeah.
of a buffer zone. It seems nice
Right.
and simple and reasonable.
Yeah,
The only time I could think that it might affect SEPTA, bless their heart, is that SEPTA has fiber optic cable buried in its right of way. And I have no idea on which side of the track that fiber optic cable is buried and how, if at all, it could be affected by the roots of bamboo systems.
So, Lauren, with this by way of feedback, I guess I'm not hearing that we're quite ready for a vote next week. What's your sense? What's the sense of council?
I would say we're not ready for a vote next week. That's one man's opinion, but
yeah, I don't think we can come up with something that quickly to revise it.
I mean, I would like to see included in it what's already worked out in a number of other ordinances, including Rutledge's, Chadsworth's, not Rose Valley, but I think Haverford, where they do have the provision that allows you to go ahead and plant new bamboo in a certain manner. Because I think that
You're talking about
people
just
should be allowed
above
to.
ground
Yeah.
containers?
Mhm. I mean, if you had a patio and you wanted an ornamental stand of bamboo, I don't see why you should not be allowed to do that. But it is included in some
Yeah.
other ordinances, and I think that would be, and it's already
I don't
worked
see a
out. It's
problem.
exactly the same wording in
Okay.
each of these other
Okay.
ordinances.
I
So
don't see a problem.
it
with
seems
that.
to be an accepted method
Right.
of planting.
Oh, sure.
And I would certainly like to see that.
All right, so back to the drawing board.
Well, I'm back to the drawing board, but maybe back to your committee for a little bit, a little bit of revision. And is your committee going to meet this month?
We might be now.
Sure.
When is your meeting?
Well, can we get back to you?
Well, we have.
It's up to you.
We do have the issue of publicly scheduled announcement. So what's your regular meeting time?
Okay, we can meet at our listed time, which is at 7 o'clock. April, hold on a second. It's before the EAC meeting, so it would be April 28th at 7 o'clock
AM or PM? PM.
PM. Can the Davids come?
If the meeting has changed, we will change it and post it online.
Okay, so for now, the Environment Committee is going to tweak this ordinance at their meeting of April 28th
Yes.
at 7 p.m.
Yes.
All right, anything else for the environment?
That's it.
Just on meeting dates and publicizing of them, we have these standing meeting dates. The Sunshine Act's kind of unclear on whether you need to advertise committee meetings, but in an abundance of caution, we do so. So if we're going to be consistent with that, and you want to change a meeting date, you need to give us at least a week's notice. We can get the ad in this one.
Okay.
All right, next, general government. David.
Thanks, Ralph. We met last month. We approved the January minutes, which are posted online. We had three main topics, ongoing discussion on the borough website, which is essentially up to date right now. If you visit the homepage, and there's actually been progress since the meeting that I can talk about. But mulch deliveries on there, the...
Payment, he needs payment. You can pay online.
I wasn't even getting to that, but yes, you know, still...
Not delivering it over the website.
Yes, but the online payment has been activated since our meeting, which was a topic discussion at the meeting, but now you can pay online, mulch, which is cool. The Central Park plans are on there. Well, there's one more.
It's on there?
Yeah, there's one more bullet on the front page.
We've had a lot. Today we just put up the spring cleanup.
Which is, yeah, so that's even better. So check our website and stay up to date on the community. Lisa's in charge, and she, Lisa's here tonight. She's in charge of the edits. So if you do catch any proofs or edits or mistakes, it's like any large document, because there's lots of documents. Within the documents, let us know. So more use is better and helps us proof. We kind of moved from that conversation to an ongoing conversation about our overall borough communication and touching a little bit on social media and whether that means next to Swarthmore or Facebook. And it was the consensus of the committee that we will, I'm opening this up to Borough Council for conversation, we will keep our communication limited to either speaking to us directly in person or by telephone. And all our email addresses are posted on the borough website. Or you can call the borough office, or you can send us an email. But we are going to, at this time, not expand our communication through to social media, which is a variety of different platforms, and there can be a variety of different discussions, I guess. And then I think our overwhelming concern was that we don't control the flow of information. So there can be a mix of both fact and opinion, and then that can come across as borough news when it, in fact, is not borough news. Just because someone states something and uses Swarthmore Borough, that doesn't mean it's just one person put that up there. It may or may not be accurate. So, and now that may evolve as social media evolves, but that was the recommendation of the committee. One small topic we were talking about has already evolved, and we have film tonight. So we should acknowledge who's our cameraman? Dave, thank you for filming. Our fourth David. Our efforts at GoPro produce nice video, but our microphones didn't capture all the audio. So you have to lean in and talk into the mics. So we're experimenting with a professional, and this might be the way to go forward. And then we also have an ongoing discussion of benefits. I circulated minutes. I know there's lots of topics tonight. We meet again April 20th at 8:30 a.m. And I will circulate an agenda Friday. That's all I have.
All right, Jim, thank you.
Just a small follow-up state. We are working on getting this broadcast to go live over our channels like it used to, as well as replaying it over our channels, and it will play on our YouTube channel, so that will get both methods of communication out there.
There'll be a link on the borough website to the YouTube link.
Terrific, and it's great to hear that the website is so robust, and
Check it daily.
I encourage people to look at it. When you have questions, it's the first place to go. Next, Elizabeth, Planning and Zoning.
Okay. Thank you. The biggest agenda item here is to report on the presentation to the Planning Commission in March of the Town Center / Central Park project. That's being looked at. That's the project for the borough parking lot, essentially. The Centennial Foundation presented it to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission had a fair amount of discussion about it and voted to approve the land development application with a number of comments, contingent on a number of comments. And in fact, quite a few of those have already been addressed by at least the architectural drawings. I don't think they've been picked up in the engineering drawings. So some of these comments are already moot points. There were two waivers that were asked for. One was a waiver requiring a certain number of street trees, and the plan falls short by, I think, 3, according to our borough engineer's calculation. But in looking at the overall plan, the Planning Commission and also the Planning and Zoning Committee that met the following week both felt that the trees were appropriately distributed given the project. The other waiver was to not require a separate landscape plan, which is what we normally require for land development projects. And there was the landscape planting and maintenance will be performed by both the Centennial Foundation and the Swarthmore Borough Society, as they do now for many of our gardens downtown. And so it was considered a little bit onerous to have to put together an actual drafted landscape plan for that. There was discussion about that waiver in the Planning and Zoning Committee that met the following week. We felt that there should be some acknowledgement that the current direction of plantings in the main part, the downtown part of the borough, is to pay attention to drought-resistant plantings, for instance. At the same time, these are wonderful plantings that we have downtown, done by volunteer efforts, and so the committee ended up feeling that if the waiver language or some notes on the drawings could simply acknowledge that sort of the bones, the skeleton of the plantings, the perennials and trees and bushes could be selected with an eye towards drought-resistant appropriate plantings, then that's still allowed. Annuals to change year by year, have the splash of color, etc. So I think that Tim actually rewrote the waiver language after the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, and I was very happy with what you expressed there. So I think that that's something that we are feeling, at least the committee was feeling quite comfortable with, Planning Commission was feeling comfortable with. There were also a couple comments from the Delaware County Planning Department that came in. One of them was to increase the availability of bike stands and to improve the ones we already have right outside our door at Borough Hall.
Here, here.
And that's also already been addressed on the architectural plans. There was one other major comment by Planning Commission at the time that the presentation was made to them. We continue to have a pathway with periodic steps leading from the parking lot up to Borough Hall. And there was a comment, wouldn't it be nice if that could be a ADA accessible ramp instead? And again, the architectural drawings now reflect a ramp, which is really nice.
That will be made skateboard impervious?
No.
No,
Okay.
that would be a hard one to
Well, I don't
figure out.
know. Step 2 will be
Right.
skateboard.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with people skateboarding on it as long as they're respectful and they're not doing damage
Right.
to
One other comment that was made by Delaware County Planning Department was that they wanted to see an additional crosswalk added. They felt that if we were putting a crosswalk from the co-op to the town green, we then should have a crosswalk from the town green across to the bank. We're not obligated to take Delaware County Planning Department's comments, advice, but it's something that that was one of the two main things that they brought up. We're also in the middle of still discussing how the new crosswalks will aesthetically work together with the existing ones. Because the way we have the existing ones in the downtown are actually not a construction method that is approved currently.
We can, actually.
We can now?
Yeah, we can.
You should-
The
okay.
engineer researched it, and he said if we want to spec those, he said,
We can still do it?
right, PennDOT, it was PennDOT Road, they would even let us put them in, they just, if they had to repay it,
Ah.
they wouldn't redo it, but this road will never be
Okay,
paid by PennDOT.
good,
So
good.
if you want to spec those out, we can.
I mean, I think that they would look, they're all in very close proximity to each other, would look better if they all matched.
Which of course would mean painting, repainting the ones we have.
Yeah, no, I thought it might be an opportunity.
Well,
Yeah.
at least the
There's some
one
more,
that
absolutely.
currently we have from Aria to the co-op.
Well, it's-
Yeah.
It makes sense.
There was also, there's one other recommendation that the Planning Commission made that has since been actually retracted. And that is that they felt that there should be new paving on the concrete right outside of Borough Hall. And the scope of this project really came up to that point and stopped a few days after their meeting. The Planning Commission member who had made that suggestion actually said he'd been outside Borough Hall and it was in fine shape. So that's been removed. There are a few other comments about maybe some better lighting at crosswalks. But I think that in general, as I said, a lot of these things actually have already been picked up in the architectural drawings. There was also a conversation in the committee, the Planning and Zoning Committee, about the logistics of bidding the project and the agreement between the borough and the Centennial Foundation, and the logistics of the selection of contractors. At the moment, the thought is that there be one particular contractor who would do the rammed earth construction, which is a specialized construction that would be used for these seating walls, seating height walls at the amphitheater and at the plaza near the co-op. And I'm not sure how that works, because we have to have an open bid.
Yeah, this morning about that. You're entitled to hire professional services without going through bid. So if this person is a design consultant or a construction manager, you do not need to advertise for those services. But as to the actual work itself, the physical work, you can't exclude, if this person comes with a staff of workers, you can't be paying them to do that work without going through a bid. Because that physical work, that labor is not professional services, it's something that needs to be bid. So I need to understand this better, but I think that if you're talking about one individual who is going to manage that aspect of it, it's going to be fine. But if that person comes to the workforce, then that's not it. So your general contractor is going to have to do the work. You can do it in another direction.
And what about volunteer work?
Yeah.
For that?
It shouldn't be a problem. Volunteers for the whole thing, for the whole rammed earth aspect of it, or
the rammed earth part is actually not. There's not a whole lot of it. I mean, because of the way that the structure works, there's a concrete foundation for it. At the amphitheater, there's a concrete stem wall that actually does holds the whatever. So it's a question of, the idea was that this would be, this artist would come in and she would organize this kind of.
as long as people aren't being paid,
Yeah, well,
it should be fine. But
the general idea is that it's physical labor, but you actually get to make something that's going to be there forever. It's a very cool stuff.
any physical labor that's paid for is going to have to be part of the
Right.
contract.
I think one of the things that needs to be made clear right now is that what we're talking about for Borough Council at this particular point is voting on the land development drawings. That is different. They will not be the same drawings as what is then put out to bid. The drawings are going to end up having more details and being a full set of bid drawings. So I think the process, normally the Borough Council does not get involved other than giving a building permit, doesn't get involved in paying close attention to the bid drawings from, say, an aesthetic point of view or a maintenance point of view or any of that. In this particular rather unusual case, we are also, the project is for the borough, so we do have to be conscious of those issues. And so I think that there would have to be another step in the process by Borough Council at the bid drawing stage.
The way I'm looking at it, you've got 4 council actions that are
Okay.
necessary. One is the land development plans
Mhm.
approval. The next would be an agreement between the foundation and the borough.
Right.
And Ralph, Jane, and I have worked on a first draft that I'll distribute to council in the next week. Third would be, you're going to have to vote to advertise for bids,
Right.
which means you're going to be endorsing a set of drawings at that point.
Mhm.
And then the fourth bid vote would be to award a contract.
Mhm.
So, and as to those bid docs, who it is that's going to make those final call on that, whether it's the
Well,
borough engineer
right,
or the
I'm
committee
assuming,
or.
right, I'm assuming we would want the borough engineer to look at the bid documents before they go out and report back to borough council if there are any maintenance issues that he sees or details that he feels would be an issue on whatever basis or whatever, because it is a borough long-term maintenance issue.
Well, just a question on that timeline. Are there any advertising triggers on any of this? For example, Elizabeth, when would you contemplate that we actually vote
Okay,
on land development?
I'm not sure. We have to sort of work backwards. It's hoped that the construction could take place during July and August and into September, so that we're taking the parking lot out of line in the quietest time of the year. But to do that, the bid process itself has to be advertised twice.
Yeah.
So working backwards, we're actually in a very tight timeframe, I think.
I would agree.
Do you need
So
30
when
days
you-
to advertise what? I don't recall.
Well, kind of, because it's 2 successive weeks for a bid, and,
Second one big amount more than, not less than 10 days or 7 days. I don't recall.
That can be tightened up if needed.
no, it's by borough.
No, it's a statute.
But I'm just saying typically we go month to month with borough council meetings.
Oh, yeah, you could have a special
We can-
meeting or.
right,
we could
right.
have it done.
Just throwing it out.
Give the authorization to advertise, but yeah.
But
we don't-
Elizabeth, when is the land development?
I think we have to, I've been assuming that by next week we have to vote on land development to extend any chance at.
And what is the
that.
document that we're
We
going
have, I was
to
just
vote
thinking
on?
of that,
Well-
Ralph, thank you. Yeah, I have old plans, but normally a new set of plans with incorporating whatever changes have been suggested by the planning commission. So we need to get those to council so they have a document to review.
So I think last month it was, we saw.
Right.
An
Some-
overview, right.
And so it's going to be a variation of that, and we would vote on it next week. We don't need to.
It's been
special
advertised, so you can.
Okay.
Correct, so we'll have to get some documents
So does that
out.
make sense? Next week we'll vote on that.
I think that's.
I think it should be on the agenda.
Yes.
With the hope that.
Right. What I would also, though, I think would be very useful to have before next week's vote, and I think, Tim, you were preparing some of this information, is to give council a little bit more information about the Rounder, the specific person and their experience and so forth, and maybe their projects in the area, and exactly what role that person does. Is that person developing the construction details for the Round Earth, or is Tanya Engineering developing those details, and who's writing the specs on that? I mean, we have to sort of nail this down, in my view, a little bit more specifically.
Elizabeth, is that
So
something
that
we need to
the
do
borough
before we
engineer-
vote on land development, or before the bid package goes out
Before
for
the
bid?
bid package.
Right, and I think you have a month, because you'll need to vote on that as well, authorization to go out to bid.
Right.
So concerns that you have or anyone else, you could put together
Right.
for that next meeting, which I guess would be May, to authorize going out to bid.
But the advertising of the bid package is once it's authorized, not before the vote to authorize it.
Well, you could do it in one of two ways. You could have a final set of bid drawings that you're then voting to advertise, or you could say, or you could vote to advertise once the borough engineer is satisfied with it. If you need need some more time on something.
Well, then, given the tight timeline of this, shouldn't we also plan on
We should aim.
vote to advertise next week so that by,
Advertise for bid.
yeah, so
Right,
that by
okay.
May,
So that
we
we
can
can
actually have
put
the
it
bids out.
Right.
So it really doesn't have to come back to council. It's whoever you decide, Elizabeth, the engineer is ready for it to go, we can advertise it.
Sorry to get
Yeah.
into all these
Right.
detailed
No,
time
that's
questions, but does Borough Council have to select the winning bidder, or can that just be the low?
No, council has to do that.
So that has to be at a council meeting. So if the bids go out in May, council is not going to select the winning
Until June.
bidder until June unless we find a way. I mean, I'm just,
Or you have a special council meeting.
well, so if we want to begin construction in June,
July.
so picking the winning bidder in June would be okay.
There's I can tell, yeah.
All right,
I
so,
think you got it. I think that's
so
good.
the
Yeah.
schedule would be vote on the land development approval next week, and if it's approved, we'd vote on authorizing advertising. Then it could be advertised in June, and
It would be
Advertised
advertised
in
in
May.
May and awarded in June.
So that way I would be working backwards from that June meeting to make sure it got advertised, the bid package got done and advertised in time to make that June deadline.
And
and that seems to work for everyone.
to clarify one thing though, I think that everything, the reason I was suggesting that it would be useful for Borough Council to get a little bit more information about the Rand Earth aspect of this. Normally that is not a part of land development, but because of our very short time frame after a vote to approve land development, that is actually probably the most unique part of the design. And I think that in that sense, Borough Council should get that information about what that looks like physically and what it is, what that design
I don't
is.
think it's a problem.
So
mean,
I think it would be useful for us to all, know a little bit more about that, because that really is one of the most unusual aspects. And so,
And one of the coolest aspects.
yeah. And so I think that it would be useful if we could get that information
Okay.
next week if it's possible.
Great.
If I might ask, it's my understanding that this entire project, the only part of this entire project that is being paid for by the taxpayers of the borough will be the repaving of the parking lot, which we would do in any event. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Or the amounts charged to us by our engineer and solicitor for professional service involved in reviewing the project. Is that correct? Am I correct in this?
No, that's my understanding, and on that score, I think we do owe a great thank you to Centennial Foundation for not only agreeing to fund this, but for being the impetus behind it. And frankly, a big thank you to our mayor, Tim Carney, who's played an instrumental role in getting this moved along.
And also, is it my understanding that this, particularly apropos of the other item on the agenda tonight, not including bamboo, that this project will result in the doing of this project will result in the net loss of 5 parking spaces in the borough parking lot. And I would hasten, however, to say, and if I'm incorrect, somebody correct me, that is not because the aggregate parking space in the parking lot is being reduced, but rather the new parking spaces will be an appropriate width, and so everybody can drive their humongous SUVs and park without soaping the sides of their car. And so we'll have proper parking spaces there as we do out on Park Avenue. But we will, when this is done, have 5 fewer parking spaces available in the municipal parking lot.
But it actually...
It's not an A, it's just a fact.
Right. We actually, the parking area, the paved area, is going to go down by a fair amount.
Almost 4,000 square feet.
Right. So we're actually increasing the amount of green area.
Okay. So it's worse than I thought. I was trying to make everybody feeling better.
Or better.
No, better,
Okay.
because we've got more of a park.
No,
We've got more gathering spaces. But you're absolutely
I'm sorry.
right.
That's a big deal.
The parking spaces will be.
I learned
normal size.
once that when the Court of Appeals is looking in your favor, you stop talking. I talked a moment too long there, sorry. So we have less parking area than we used to have as a result of this project being done.
But larger spaces.
But larger spaces and a lot of green stuff.
And I might add,
2 major gathering points for people to get together in a community aspect, one outside the co-op and one outside Borough Hall in the amphitheater.
and I might add a lit parking lot too.
Yes.
The lighting aspect.
I didn't do that.
Something.
Elizabeth, anything else on?
The committee report is simply that we spent most of the time talking about what we just talked about, and we also started to discuss modifications to the institutional zoning ordinance, which we picked up and put away and picked up and put away for some time now. So that's back on track. And that there will be a planning commission meeting on April 15th, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. And there will be a land development presentation by the college for a small project. And then there's also going to be a planning and zoning committee meeting on April 28th, which is a Tuesday at 7:30 a.m., where we will be discussing both what was presented by the college and also continuing the institutional zoning.
Excellent.
May I make one further point? I would hope that the monies required, I have no idea how much it would be, to repave the borough parking lot a source of funds will be found for that, so that it will not come at the expense of the 2015 street paving program.
That's a good discussion point. I don't know if anybody can hazard a ballpark guess as to what that is right now or maybe next week, but it's something that council should keep in mind when we vote to approve this, which would implicitly be a vote to spend the money on a pavement. So maybe by next week we'll have at least a ballpark idea of what that component will be. And with that aspiration for next week's meeting, thanks very much, Elizabeth. And let me turn to public safety. David.
Okay, I'm going to make this as quick as I possibly can. I'm not going to make any promises. So, at our committee meeting last month, we had 3 major items on the agenda. Parking, which I'll come back to. The future of the Swarthmore Fire and Protective Association. And an issue that had been raised concerning cyclists and runners circulating through borough streets, especially after dark, and especially this past winter with ice and snow and that sort of thing. I'll take the easy one first. Cyclists and runners. There were a couple of runners who came to the meeting, and we discussed the wisdom for cyclists and runners to be careful when circulating on the public highways. That anytime a car and a runner or a car and a cyclist confront one another, the car is going to win 100% of the time. So it's in the runners and the cyclists' best interest to be careful and prudent and courteous, to be safe for themselves and not to create unsafe conditions for other folks. And one of the runners, resident of the borough, who was present at the meeting, engaged to post the information on a running Facebook site that's used by local runners and push it out on social media. That basically was all the discussion we had about that issue. On the Swarthmore Fire and Protective Association and its future, we've begun a dialogue, and I mean literally just begun a dialogue with the fire company about what the rest of this year might look like, next year, the next 5 years, and beyond. We obviously didn't come to any sort of conclusion, but the fire company is trying to get a handle on its current and its future situation, or what the future situation is likely to be. We discussed finances, operations, potential cooperation with other fire companies, regionalization, et cetera, all in sort of hypothetical general terms. Again, there wasn't anything very concrete about the conversation, but we've begun the process anyway with the goal of getting a clear understanding, at least by the end of this year, where we think the fire company might be headed. You know, and I'm just going to repeat this for the benefit of the public, because the folks on council already know this. Volunteer fire companies all over the country, including in Pennsylvania, are experiencing difficulties nowadays because of lack of volunteers. 50 years ago, you had a lot of able-bodied people in their 20s and 30s and 40s who were volunteering for their local fire company, and that's just, economics have changed, our culture, our society has changed, and it's just not the case anymore. So we're facing an uncertain future in this borough as far as our volunteer fire company goes. Not in the short term, but more thinking ahead a little bit. But this is happening everywhere. You may have read about it in the paper or seen stories on it. It's an issue. So we're trying to get ahead of it to the extent that we can. We've begun that discussion. And then what you've all come for, parking. So there were 3 aspects to our discussion of parking. First, Cornell Avenue. Folks that live on the 100 block of Cornell Avenue, especially those that live on the west or the north side of that block where there are no driveways, have had some issues with finding parking spots on their street. Because these spots have been occupied essentially by commuters, perhaps postal workers, etc. Well, lo and behold, in the existing Swarthmore ordinances, that part of Cornell Avenue is actually already designated permit parking only. And there was a time, I don't know how far back in the past, Jane, when folks who lived on that block had their own colored stickers. So we're going to be going back to that system for that block.
We ordered some hang tags.
Hang tags, we're not going to use stickers anymore. The police prefer hang tags, easier to enforce. They don't get covered up with stuff and so forth. So that was one sort of micro parking issue we dealt with. The other thing we talked about was the new technology we're going to be adopting. And of course, people will continue to be able to deposit coins in meters for as long as they, for the foreseeable future anyway. But we're contracting with Passport Parking, Inc. to provide a mobile payment platform so that those folks who would like to pay with their cell phone or other electronic means can do so. That hasn't been rolled out yet, but we're entering into agreement with Passport Parking, and that will be another innovation. Again, it's for those who want to continue to put coins in the meters, that's fine. The rest of it will be invisible and it won't matter. But for folks who would like to be able to use their cell phones, either to, maybe they don't have any change, they want to put the money in the meter for the day if they're parking at a 12-hour meter, or maybe they're parking at a 4-hour meter and they want to renew it. And by the way, 4-hour meters can be renewed once, so you have 8 hours in a 4-hour metered spot. They could do that with a cell phone instead of rushing out and putting money into the meter. To get to the heart of the issue, I think a lot of people know this. I think Marty knows it. Council has been discussing parking in the borough for, it's been at least 2 years. Prior to the time when I became chair of the Public Safety Committee, when Ralph was chair of that committee. And a lot of work over the past couple of years has been done on the parking situation. And the committee and council have been fortunate enough to actually get quite a bit of input from merchants and others in the Ville. Not all of you who are here tonight have been to all of those meetings, but some of you have. And we did get a lot of input. And the conclusion that we came to was that the current situation simply wasn't rational, didn't make any sense. And the whole purpose of having a few 30-minute meters, quite a few, maybe even a lot, 2-hour meters, some 4-hour meters, and 12-hour meters was to get, and the way we have them arranged geographically in the borough, was to get long-term parkers, such as commuters, out towards the edge of the Ville. And then as you come more in towards the center, the parking meter durations decrease in time. So we have the 12-hour meters out along Myers Avenue. We've got new 4-hour meters, 10 of them on Park, 10 of them on Dartmouth. Part of the thought with the 4-hour meters was that these were meters that merchants, for example, could use if they wanted to. It wasn't a guarantee there would be 1 of the 20 spots would be open, but they're at least theoretically available. And you'd only have to put money in the meter once during the day if you were using coins. And if you were using a cell phone, you wouldn't have to leave your place of business. So that was part of the thought there. Of course, they'd also be available to commuters who were going to be there for 8 hours, who were going to have their car there for 8 hours or less. The thought behind the 2-hour meters was to, the 2-hour meters again can be renewed once, so you can spend up to 4 hours in a 2-hour metered spot. The idea was to provide more turnover in the central part of the Ville, and then a few 30-minute meters in strategic spots, the bank, dry cleaners, etc., where people would be sort of more in and out. So that was the philosophy behind it, not unreasonable. But one of the great things about the current setup is we passed an ordinance a couple of months ago, which now allows council to change parking meter zones, parking meter rates or fees, fines, etc., via resolution. This gives us a lot more, and we're going to vote. I'm going to put one up for vote tonight, which is going to embody the current system, the one I just described, and which is described in the resolution. Which is it on the website? Mm-hmm. Yes. So, but we're doing this with the realization that it's not perfect. We had the old system for so long, we don't really know, how this one is going to compare. Whether there are, for example, too many 2-hour meters. Maybe there should be more 4-hour meters. Maybe there should be more 12-hour meters. Maybe there should be more 30-minute, less 30-minute. We don't know yet. We've tried to come up with something that seems reasonable after a couple of years of study and thinking about it. But, we're going to learn from experience. And because we now can change all of this by resolution, it won't be such a cumbersome project. All that being said, I think we need to give the current system a chance. We need to give it some time to see how it works. We can't be changing it, every month or even every 6 months. That's just not gonna work. So we need to give the current system some time. When the new College Inn and Station Square West and all that comes online, we don't know exactly yet how that's going to affect the parking situation, but it's going to change it. There are going to be more 2-hour spots available. There will also be some more longer-term spots available once all of that's completed. We don't know yet exactly what that's going to look like and whether that's going to meet everybody's needs or not. But we will be able to revisit this as we learn. So that's the intent of the work we've been doing on parking for these past couple of years, and it's what we're thinking going forward. So that by way of background, I'm going to go ahead and, I know Ralph said under Robert's Rules of Order there can be discussion after I make the motion, but I am going at this time to move that council adopt resolution number 2015-02, establishing parking meter hours of operation, zones, time limits, fees, and fines.
You've all received a copy of this by email. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion?
I just wanted to state on the record, I would commend Mr. Craven's patience and his thoroughness in shepherding this process.
I second that. Any other questions, comments, discussion?
I think the other thing that should be mentioned is that very early on, I think in the beginning of this process, probably when you were doing public service safety, there was a fair amount of research about what comparable parking rates were around us. And I know that it's a little bit of a shock when parking goes up in cost when we haven't changed it for so long. And that probably in itself was the problem. But we're not out of line with what neighboring communities do and similar downtown areas, as far as I understand it.
That's right, and it's definitely not a revenue generation project. The borough's not going to get rich off of parking revenues, but being as low as they are. But yeah, I mean, again, I think part of the thought behind raising the rates a little bit was it goes along with the increase in enforcement to get people to think a little more carefully about where they're parking and why they're parking there.
Ralph, it might be worth noting too that those who look at the ordinance and see what the penalty is for the second violation might see it as being somewhat draconian. But we have too much empirical evidence that commuters felt that a $5 fine was a bargain compared to driving into Philadelphia and paying $25 or $30 to park for the day. We hope as our own residents become accustomed to these rates, and particularly with the possibility of remotely renewing within the allowed time period at different rates, that they won't find themselves in a position of having to pay $25 for the second offense. Second offense in the same spot, I should say. That is, the $25, as I understand it, is only triggered if a car is there for a long period of time in the same spot, not having far beyond the permissible parking allowance for that spot that day for that car.
Any other comments? I would just add my thanks also to David for the work he and his committee have done, and I know from the time I spent as chair of public safety and sat through more than a few sessions where we looked at this very difficult issue. And it's a difficult issue because parking is a scarce resource in this community, and there are different competing users who have different time frames and different interests, and there's no parking ordinance that we could pass that would make everybody happy. There just aren't enough available parking spaces in this town to do that. And so I think the committee has really struck a very good balance. I think there are something like 93 12-hour meters out of a total of more than 300 meters. There are 18 30-minute meters. There are 24-hour parking meters. If this is not the perfect balance, then with some experience, we'll be able to fine-tune it. But I think the committee has done a terrific job. It's not exactly the list and the map that I would have come up with, but I wholeheartedly endorse it as an important step forward. I think the technology of being able to pay for parking on your phone. So when your errand takes you 20 minutes longer than you thought it would, you'll be able to re-up by phone. I think that's an improvement. So those are my comments.
Yeah, and on that last point, when the rollout of the mobile payment platform happens, that will be well advertised.
Yes, I was just waiting for the resolution to be passed, and then Passport will have stickers that will have new meter numbers and zones on all meters and materials for rolling out the program.
I think the other thing that was definitely thoroughly discussed in the Public Safety Committee dealt with the 4-hour spaces, and there was very strong acknowledgement that we need to be keeping an eye out carefully on how they are used. And it was they are not meant ideally to disappear, all be used up by 8 o'clock in the morning and have a car parked there all the time. So there are things that we may decide to do if we find that those 4-hour spaces are being used by essentially all-day commuters, because we're aware of that problem, and we're aware that they need to be available for people who come into town a little bit later in the morning. So.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I call for a vote. The resolution is to establish parking meter hour zones, time limits, meter fees, and fines. All in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted.
And just to conclude my report then, the Public Safety Committee will meet at its regularly scheduled time this month, Tuesday, April 21st at 7:30 p.m.
David, thank you very much. Next, Public Works.
The Public Works, Parks, and Recreation Committee will meet Thursday, April 23rd in this room at 8 o'clock in the morning. I expect a full agenda, including the 2015 street paving program, some issues involving Little Country Park, and a number of other issues. So, as I said, expect a full discussion at that time. And everyone is, of course, as always, with all our committees, who cares to get up at 8 in the morning and join us would be welcome.
David, thank you. If there's no other committee business to come before council, Mr. Mayor.
Nothing much today. I mean, I think one thing I would say about the parking issue just is that we do need to figure out something about the merchants, how that's going to kind of work. I mean, just anecdotally, in the last couple of days since the sort of meter changes, the 4-hour spots are filled up very early, and the lot has been open, for a while. So I think there may be some tweaking that can.
Tim, do your anecdotes tell you whether the 4-hour meters are filled up by people who pay for 4 hours and then leave the cars there for many hours longer than that?
No, I don't have that kind of information. Well, I just, when I ride by on my bike or in my car.
Because hopefully our two-tiered enforcement would be a deterrent to that kind of.
I would agree. And it's true that right now, we because we don't have the pay by phone thing yet, that it's been it's a shock to many people when we kind of have. That's just what we'll tell them. I would also note that on Saturday I witnessed a bald eagle circling above President Jacobs' house over on which I thought was pretty cool. And that
they were helping us out with our mice.
That's right. And I also am hoping that Wisconsin does well tonight. Okay, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. This being our work session, we invite the public again to give us comment on anything we've discussed today or anything else you care to comment on. Please come up to the microphone and let us have your comments.
This is Lori Artis again from Swarthmore Valley Theater. How are we supposed to know that we can renew it for 4 hours and only once for 4 hours? Because when I saw the 4-hour sign on there, I presumed I couldn't stay more than 4 hours. I'd have to move my car.
I don't know how to answer that question because it's not on, we will put it on a sign near the meters.
Well, but we can also publicize the fact of the Swarthmore.
Well, we can, but, you know, people are not.
Well, I know some are.
Yeah.
We do it.
We're running out of room. I mean, all seriousness, I
Yeah.
don't think we can put that on the meter. I'll think about it. I don't know what else to say.
But certainly, most of the people who would be interested in that would be people who are in Swarthmore frequently, and if we find ways of publicizing it,
Absolutely, yeah.
the word should get around.
Well, I think when the transition is made with the pay by phone thing, that would be an opportunity to make sure people understand.
Just for now, the short answer to your question is there are only 4 kinds of meters in town now. There's the 30-minute. They can't be renewed. In other words, the whole purpose of the 30-minute slot is to get in and out. You don't have to stay for 30 minutes, but not stay longer than that. And there are a few of those. There aren't many of those spots. The 2-hour meters can be renewed once. So you can stay 4 hours in a 2-hour spot. The 4-hour meters can be renewed once, so you can stay 8 hours in a 4-hour spot. And the 12-hour meters, you know, you can put 12 hours worth of time in when you first pull in, or you could put 2 hours in and renew it later, up to 12 hours. So really, the only thing I guess sort of to keep in mind is, except for the 30-minute meter, you know, you have a chance to double, you know, to double your time.
And then at 5 o'clock, when the meters no longer need to be fed, does that limit still hold? For instance, if I parked in front of my place and I renewed the 2-hour thing, and then I stayed after 5.
We thank you for your extra money.
Yes. No, there's no
No carryover to the next day.
Yeah. There's no enforcement after 5. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any other comments?
And there's no enforcement on Saturdays
Or something.
or Sundays.
Hello, my name is Mike Hanford. I live at 65 Forest Lane. I've been there 31 years. Dave Grove was the first person I met in Swarthmore 31 years ago, I believe. Just a brief comment on the bamboo proposed ordinance. I have bamboo in my backyard. It was there when I moved in. I only recently learned where it came from. It came from the lady that lived behind the, not the people that lived there then, but the one that lived there before that. So the bamboo does spread to my property, and I try to maintain it as best I can. But when you go to the definition here of the bamboo owner, I really think that definition should be modified, because the last paragraph, the last clause of that definition says even if the bamboo owner has spread from an adjoining property, or even if the bamboo has spread from an adjoining property. I think if you're the so-called victim as opposed to the perpetrator, if the bamboo has spread from property A to property B, and you're on property B and you're doing your best to maintain it, and then the neighbor at property C makes a complaint against you by property B, you should be really exempt from taking the onus of spending $10,000 to have a professional come in and remove the bamboo. The owner should be put on the owner of property A. And, you know, fortunately at this point I've not received any complaints from any adjoining neighbors. But what happens when one of those houses gets sold? And you have the current neighbor saying the bamboo's fine with me, and then the new neighbor comes in and it's patently obvious the bamboo is there. They negotiate a price for that house, perhaps taking into account the fact that there is bamboo there, maybe buying it at a cheaper price. And then that new neighbor comes in and files a complaint against you when for 31 years you've been fined. So I think the definition of bamboo owner really should be modified and take into account the origin of the bamboo. I have no problem with prohibiting the planting of new bamboo, although you make a good point of, if you put it in a pot, it stays in the pot, why not? But in any event, I think you're talking 5 figures here in order to get a real professional to come in and remove a substantial amount of bamboo, particularly when you're talking about a buffer area of 10 feet and a square footage of 750 feet. There are very few professional bamboo people that know how to do it correctly. I brought in this fellow, John Kohler, at one of the meetings previously. He spoke here. He's the president of Chester County Bamboo. He's backed up 3 or 4 months in his work, which leads me to say that on the second page, a notice goes out to a property owner and you have 60 days to remove it. It's impossible. You could take steps towards removing it, and I think those words should be put into the language of this. But to say you have 60 days to remove it, then you go out and hire somebody who's a shoddy person who says, oh, I can do it immediately, but then they do a lousy job, and a year later the bamboo comes up again. This one fellow, John Kohler, guarantees his work, and will come back and, you pay for the job, but he'll come back and remove any additional bamboo for free. So you really need more than 60 days here. I would suggest 120, or at least put in language to the effect that you take a substantial step towards the removal of the bamboo, and not have some code enforcer coming in 60 days later and say, I still see bamboo in your yard. It would be impossible to remove it in a timely manner, and yet also hire a professional. So in the definition of bamboo owner, the words maintain and permit, I think, are unduly vague. Suppose the bamboo spreads from yard A to yard B, and you're the owner of yard B, and you do your best to cut it back. And you go around and you clip it at its roots and you trim it. Does that mean that you're permitting the bamboo? Or does that mean you're maintaining the bamboo when you're doing your best to get rid of it? I don't think so. But I would submit that those words are unduly vague and subject to varying interpretation. So I think that should be amended. I do commend the committee, though, in its language that the enforcement of the ordinance would not take effect until there's an actual complaint by an adjoining neighbor. Because if 2 neighbors are perfectly happy with having the bamboo at the border between the 2 yards, then, no harm, no foul. So, all right, I've already spoken longer than I wanted to, and I'm probably interfering with the Duke Wisconsin.
Thank you for those thoughtful comments.
Thank you.
Well, I think Mike's comments illustrate the fact that in an old community like this, it should be lost in the mist of history as to on whose property the bamboo first was planted and from which it spread. In terms of who is A and B in this. But with all that easy stuff, Lauren, your committee has no problem at all, I'm sure.
All right, any other public comment? Jane, anything?
I have no comments. I have 2 Wisconsin alumni in my family, so I'll just say go Badgers and hopefully get good.
Bob? David?
I would move we adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.